Toward the evening, he came to a poor farmhouse. It was such a run-down place that it didn't know which side to fall on, so it kept standing. The duck huddled outside as the storm raged fiercely around him. Then he noticed that the door was off a hinge and hung so crookedly that he could slip right in through the crack, which he did. Inside lived an old woman with her cat and her hen. The cat she called Sonny, and it could arch its back and purr. And if you stroked its fur the wrong way, it would give off sparks. The hen was called short, Chickabiddy Shortings, because of her love for little short legs. She laid goose eggs, and the woman loved her as much as her own child. When the morning light came, they saw the poor strange duckling. The cat began to purr and the hen to cluck. "What's this?" said the old woman, looking around. But since she couldn't see that well, she thought the duckling was a grown fat duck who had lost his way. "This isn't a rare find," she said. Now I have duck eggs too. First we must see if it's a drake." And so the duckling was allowed to stay there for 3 weeks, but no eggs came. Now the cat was the master of the household, and the hen was the lady. They were all saying "we" and "the world," for they had thought that they were half of the world, and by far the better half. The duckling tried to explain that they were not, but the hen would not allow it. "Can you lay eggs?" she asked. "No." "Then please hold your tongue." And the cat said, "Can you curve your back and purr?" "No." "Then you had better not offer your opinions without sizable people are speaking." The duckling sighed and sat in a corner. Then the fresh air and sunshine began to stream in. He had an uncontrollable urge to go for a swim on the water. He could not help but tell the hen about it. "The trouble with you is you have nothing to do. That is why you get these very strange notions. Purr or lay eggs, and then we will go away." "But it's so lovely to float on the water, so refreshing to let it close over your head and dive to the bottom," said the duckling. "Oh, that would be a fine amusement," said the hen, shivering. "I think you've lost your mind. Ask the cat about it. He's the cleverest one you know. Ask him if he likes to float on the water or dive to the bottom. Or ask our mistress, the old woman. No one is wiser than she. Do you think she wouldn't like to float on the water and get water over her head?" "You don't understand me," said the poor duckling. "Well, if we don't understand you, I'd like to know who does. Don't be so foolish, and give thanks to your Maker for all the kindness you've been given. Did you not get into a warm room to sleep in? And do you not have company from which you learn these wise things? Just take care of that as soon as you learn how to lay eggs or purr, or to give off sparks." "I think I'll go out into the wide world," said the duckling. "Yes, do go, you stupid thing," said the hen. And so the duckling went away. He floated on the water and dived to the bottom, but he could not make any friends with any animal because of his ugliness. Autumn came. The leaves in the forest turned yellow, red, and brown. The wind set them dancing in the chilly air. Clouds hung heavily in hail, and the raven stood on the fence, screaming with the cold. It was enough to make one shiver just to think of it. What would the poor duckling do? One evening, as the sun was setting in wintry splendor, a A flock of birds came out of the bushes. They were dazzling white with long, limber necks. The duckling had never seen anything so beautiful. They uttered a strange cry. Then they spread forth their splendid wings and flew up and away to warmer lands and far open lakes. As they flew high above, the duckling felt a strange sensation as he watched them. He turned around and around in the water and stretched out his neck towards them. Then he let out a cry so strange and so loud that it frightened even himself. Oh, how he longed for those beautiful, happy birds. He did not know their names or where they were flying to, but he loved them more than he had ever loved anyone before. He would have been he would have been glad if only if they might have endured the company of such a poor, ugly creature as he. Still, he's not envious. How could he even think of possessing such loveliness as theirs? The winter grew cold, very cold. The duckling had to swim around in the water to keep it from freezing entirely. But every night, the hole which he swam in got smaller and smaller. At last, he became so exhausted that he couldn't move, and he froze fast into the ice. Early in the morning, a farmer came by. When he saw what had happened, he broke the ice with his wooden shoe and carried the poor duck home to his wife. When the duckling warmed up, he became himself again. When the children wanted to play, the duckling feared they would hurt him. He fluttered up in terror into the milk pan, and the milk spurted all over the room. The woman screamed and clapped her hands, at which the duck flew into the butter tub, and into the meat barrel, and out again. Well, what a sight! The woman shrieked and shook, and struck at him with fire tongues. The children laughed and shouted as they tumbled over one another to try and catch him. It was a good time, and a good thing that the door was open. The duckling flew out amongst the bushes and newly fallen snow that lay there quite exhausted. It would have been too sad to tell the It would be too sad to tell the loneliness and misery of the duckling had to endure that night. Hard winter as he lay out in the swamp among the reeds. Then the sun began to shine again, and the larks to sing. Beautiful spring had come. The duckling raised his wings and found that they beat the air fiercely and bore him strongly away. Before he knew just how it happened, he found he was in a large garden. Apple trees stood in blossom, and sweet lilac flowers hung their long green branches down the winding canals. Oh, it was so beautiful and fresh. Then, out from the thicket came three lovely white swans. They ruffled their wings and floated ever so lightly on the water. The duckling saw they were splendid creatures that he had seen in the autumn. He felt a sudden sadness. I'll fly over to these royal birds, and if they beat me because I, who am so ugly, dare to come near them, still, it was better to be killed by them than to be bitten by the ducks, pecked by the chickens, killed by the girl who takes care of the duck guard, and suffer the hardships of winter. He flew out into the water and swam towards the beautiful swans. They watched and came sailing over to him, ruffling their wings. "Kill me!" cried the poor duck. He bent his head down upon the water and waited for death. But what was this he saw in the clear water? Below him, he had saw his own image, But he was no longer the large, clumpy duckling, hideous and ugly. He was himself, a swan. The big swans swam around him and stroked him with their beaks. Some children came into the garden and pointed at the swans. "Look," the youngest one cried. There's a new one." They clapped their hands and danced around and ran to get their parents. Bread and cake were thrown into the water, and everyone cried, "The new one is the most beautiful of all, so young and handsome." The old swans bowed their heads before him. He felt quite shy and hid his head under his wing, for he did not know what else to do. He was so happy, yet not conceited, because a good heart is never proud. "I never dreamed of so much happiness when I was the ugly duckling," he said. He thought of how he had been mocked and kicked about. Now he heard them say that he was the loveliest bird of all. The lilacs bent their branches down in the water before him. The sun shone warm and mild. He ruffled his feathers, lifted his slender neck from his heart, and there came a cry of total joy and contentment.